They called it a household matter, which is what you say when you mean. Something went wrong, someone must answer for it, and we have decided it will not be us. I should introduce myself before I go further, because I have learned, in 40 years of friendship with Callum Ashford, that his stories do not tell themselves straight, and someone who was present must supply the corrections. My name is Aldous Crane. I am a barrister by training and a landowner by inheritance, and I have known the Duke of Drenmore since we were 8 years old, and he pushed me into a river in Shropshire on a dare, and then pulled me out again, which has been, more or less, the pattern of our friendship ever since. I tell you this so that you understand I am not without sympathy for the man. I know his qualities. I have depended on them, at various points in my life, more than I would care to admit in company. I also know his faults, and the fault I am about to describe to you, the fault at the heart of this story, the one that cost him 6 months and a full winter of sitting with his own error, is a fault I recognized the moment I heard about it, because I have watched him make a version of it before. It is not cruelty. Callum Ashford is not a cruel man. It is something adjacent to cruelty, and in some ways, harder to correct. It is the particular certainty of a man who has rarely been wrong in material matters, and has therefore stopped examining his assumptions in personal ones. He was wrong about Cecily Marsh. He was wrong in a way that she absorbed without a word and walked away from with a composure that, as I told him later, should have been the first sign that he had made an error. Women who are guilty of a thing generally argue. Women who are innocent and dignified simply leave. I have found this to be reliable. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it started, which was a Tuesday in October at Drenmore Hall. Drenmore Hall sits on 4,000 acres of a county I will not name, because the county still talks about what happened, and I have no wish to contribute further to its conversation. The house is large, cold in winter, and managed with the precision that Callum Ashford brings to everything he values, which is to say with considerable care and zero warmth. His housekeeper, Mrs. Peel, had been at the hall for 22 years, and ran it with the efficiency of a general and the emotional range of a weather gauge, accurate, useful, and not particularly interested in anyone's feelings about what it was measuring. Cecily Marsh had been engaged as a seamstress for the autumn season. This is the right word, engaged, not employed in the permanent sense. The hall required a particular kind of needlework in the autumn, the household linens, the winter curtains, the repair of whatever had accumulated damage over the summer, and Mrs. Peel had, for several years, hired a woman from the village for this purpose. Her usual seamstress had gone to attend an ailing sister in Lincolnshire. Cecily Marsh was the replacement. I did not meet her until later, but I know, from everything I was subsequently told by people who had no reason to embellish, that she arrived at the hall in the first week of October with a basket of tools, a quiet manner, and the particular quality of self-possession that comes from being very good at your work and knowing it without needing to announce it. She was 24. Her grandfather had run the bakery in Ashwick Village for 40 years before his death the previous spring. Her mother had died when Cecily was 12. She had managed the household from that age and had taught herself needlework from a book and then from a woman in the village and then, eventually, from the work itself. By the time she arrived at Drenmore Hall, she had been doing alterations and fine work for the better families of the county for 3 years, and she had a reputation, among women who paid attention to such things, for the kind of precise, invisible work that is the hardest to do and the least likely to be noticed unless it is absent. She was there for 2 weeks before the incident with the silk. The silk was a length of deep blue fabric, Venetian, and expensive, that had been sent up from London for the purpose of remaking the curtains in the east drawing-room. Mrs. Peel had received it, logged it, and set it in the workroom where Cecily was operating. This much is agreed by everyone. What happened next is where the accounts diverge, and where I will give you the true version, since it took several months and a confession from an unexpected quarter to establish it, and I see no reason to keep it from you. The silk was damaged, a full yard of it, scorched along one edge in a way that made it unusable for the curtains and reduced the overall length below what was needed. Mrs. Peel discovered it on the Thursday morning of the second week. She had, I think, been looking for something, not necessarily the silk, not necessarily a reason to find fault, but she had found it, and she brought it to the Duke. Callum Ashford received the news in his study. He was at his desk. He had been going over the accounts for the home farm, which were not as he wished them to be, and he was in the particular mood that accounts produce in men who expect precision. Mrs. Peel laid out the situation as she understood it. The silk had been damaged. Cecily Marsh was the only person with access to the workroom, and Mrs. Peel's own view was that it had been done carelessly, probably with a pressing iron set too hot. He did not summon Cecily to hear her account. This is the thing I came back to when I learned the whole of it. He did not send for her. He accepted Mrs. Peel's version, Mrs. Peel, who had been at the hall for 22 years and whose account he had no reason to question, and he called Cecily Marsh to his study to inform her that her engagement was terminated. She came. This I know because Aldous, that is. I know this because I was visiting the hall that week and happened to be in the corridor outside Callum's study when she left it. She was not crying. She was not arguing. She came out of the study with the straight back of a woman who has decided, in a very short period of time, how she is going to carry this particular thing. She had a small curtsy for me. She didn't know who I was, only that I was a guest of the Duke's, and she went down the corridor to retrieve her basket from the workroom, and I watched her go, and I thought, that is a woman who has not done what she has been accused of. I will be honest with you. I did not at that moment do anything about it. I was a guest in Callum's house, and I did not know the facts, and it was not strictly my affair. I filed the impression away in the part of my mind that keeps accounts, and I went about my visit, which lasted another 2 days, and when I left I had not mentioned it. I have thought about that since. I think I was wrong not to mention it, but I also think that what happened in the 6 months that followed was, in some respects, better medicine than anything I could have administered, and I have made my peace with my own inaction on that basis. If it consoles you, I did eventually say something, just not perhaps as promptly as I should have done. The village of Ashwick is 2 miles from Drenmore Hall down a road that is passable in summer and negotiable in winter if you are on a good horse and have no alternative. It has a church, a posting inn, an apothecary, a milliner of modest ambition, and by the November of the year I am describing, a dress shop that had not been there in October. Cecily Marsh opened it in the 4th week of October, which is to say within 3 weeks of being dismissed from Drenmore Hall. I learned this from my wife, who learned it from Mrs. Harrington, who was the wife of the county's most prominent solicitor, and who had a reliable eye for what was happening in Ashwick. The shop was small. It occupied the ground floor of the old apothecary's building, which had been vacant since old Mr. Fenwick retired, and it offered alterations, fine needlework and made-to-measure work of the kind that required skill rather than volume. Cecily Marsh had, apparently, been saving toward this for some time. The dismissal from the hall had, by the account my wife gathered, simply moved the schedule forward. My wife went to the shop in November. She came back with an altered winter gown that fitted her better than anything she had owned in 10 years, and a very positive account of Miss Marsh, whom she described as precise, warm, and entirely uninterested in talking about anything she has no business discussing, which I recognized as high praise from a woman who valued discretion above nearly everything else. I confess that this intelligence, when assembled, the speed of the shop's opening, the savings already in hand, the quality of the work, began to add itself to the impression I had filed away in October. A woman who had been saving to open her own business does not carelessly ruin expensive silk. She has too much at stake. She knows what the consequences of carelessness are. because she has been calculating consequences all her working life. I did not communicate this reasoning to Callum. Not yet. I was, I admit, curious to see what he would make of it on his own. Callum Ashford is not, in the normal run of things, a man troubled by his decisions. He makes them with deliberation and defends them with the stubbornness of a man who has learned that stubbornness, in public matters, tends to hold ground better than reconsidering. This quality has served him well in the management of the estate and in his dealings with difficult tenants, and in the 3 years he spent managing a legal dispute over water rights that eventually resolved in his favor through sheer tenacious attrition. It is less useful in private matters. In private matters it means that when he is wrong he tends to know it some considerable time before he admits it, and the period between the knowing and the admitting is, to those who care for him and must witness it, extremely tiresome. I was next at the Hall in December, for the Christmas visit I had made annually for 15 years. He was, by then, already in the knowing period. I could tell because he was more precise than usual about small things. This is his tell. When Callum is comfortable with his decisions, he is expansive, generous, relaxed, capable of tolerating a great deal that he would ordinarily find inefficient. When he is not comfortable, he becomes exact. He had opinions that December about the temperature of the dining room and the scheduling of the house calls, and the question of whether the east drawing-room curtains, the ones that had never been made because the silk had been ruined, should be remade in wool instead, or whether the room could simply manage without new curtains until spring. I said nothing about any of this. I ate my Christmas dinner and watched him be precise about small things and waited. On the 3rd day of my visit he said, without any preamble, "Who runs the dress shop in Ashwick now?" I looked at him. "Miss Marsh," I said, "Cecily Marsh. She opened it in October." He was quiet for a moment. We were in the library after dinner, which is where we tend to have the conversations that matter. "How is it doing?" "Very well," I said. "My wife has been twice. Several of the county women have been, I understand. Mrs. Harrington, Lady Petford's daughter, the one who is particular about her fitted work." He said nothing further that evening. I did not press. But I noted it. January came and the county assembled, as it does, for the winter round of visits and small dinners that keep everyone civil through the cold months. Callum attended more of these than was usual for him. He is not, by preference, a social creature in winter, and normally confines himself to the obligatory and avoids the optional. That January he attended the optional as well, and I observed, on 2 occasions, that he positioned himself near the women's conversation rather than the men's, which is not his habit. I drew my conclusions. In February, my wife mentioned, with the particular casualness she employs when she means me to pay attention, that Miss Marsh had taken on an assistant. The shop was too busy for one person. There was a waiting list for the fitted work. I told Callum this over dinner at my house in early February. I told it to him in the manner of general county news, without emphasis, without the pointed silence that would have told him I was watching him receive it. I watched him receive it anyway. He cut his beef with more attention than it required and said, "Is that so?" which is what he says when he is thinking about something else entirely. "She is doing very well," I said, "considering." He looked at me. "Considering what?" "Considering that she had to start from nothing, mid-October, with winter coming." He put down his knife. "Aldous, I haven't said anything. You are about to." I considered this. "Not tonight," I said. "Tonight I am simply reporting county news." He picked up his knife. We finished dinner. He was quiet for the rest of the evening in a way that was different from his usual quiet, not the quiet of a man who has nothing to say, but the quiet of a man who is composing something and has not yet found the right beginning. The thing I had not told Callum, the thing I had been sitting with since January, when it came to me by way of my wife, who had it from Mrs. Harrington, who had it from the woman who actually knew, was this: the silk had not been ruined by a pressing iron. It had been ruined by a candle that had been left burning too close to the edge of the worktable in the workroom, by a member of the household staff, not Cecily Marsh, who had been using the workroom the evening before Mrs. Peel's discovery, in a manner not authorized and not, therefore, acknowledged when the damage was found the following morning. The member of staff in question had been, for 4 months, in a state of quiet terror that the truth would emerge. When it finally did, when she told Mrs. Peel in January, apparently overcome by a combination of guilt and the inadvisability of keeping secrets in a household where everything is eventually known, Mrs. Peel had, to her credit, told Callum immediately. He came to me in February, the day after our dinner. He sat in my library and told me what he now knew, in the precise and unembellished manner he uses for things he finds difficult, and then he was quiet. I dismissed her without hearing her, he said. It was not a question. Yes, I said. She said nothing in her own defense. She did not. He was quiet again. The fire said what fires say in February, which is that it is cold and will remain so for some time yet. Because she was innocent and dignified, he said slowly, and innocent and dignified women walk out rather than argue. I looked at him. I have mentioned this before. You have not. I have thought it very loudly in your presence, which in my experience comes to much the same thing. He almost smiled, almost. What would you do, he said. About Miss Marsh? Yes. I thought about it honestly. I would go to her, I said. I would go to the shop on the high street in the village in the ordinary course of a Tuesday morning, and I would say what is true, which is that I was wrong and she was owed better. In the village, he said, on the high street. You dismissed her publicly, in the sense that it was known. You should acknowledge the error publicly, in the same sense. He sat with this for a long moment, and if she does not receive the acknowledgment, well. Callum, I said, you dismissed this woman on false information, and she opened a thriving dress shop in 3 weeks. Whatever you think of her reception of your acknowledgment, I would not bet against her capacity to manage it with more grace than you managed the original situation. He left my house that evening, and I did not hear from him for 4 days. The Tuesday morning he went to Ashwick was the 14th of February, which I noted with the private amusement I reserve for occasions when Callum Ashford's actions align, however accidentally, with conventional sentiment. He did not, I think, choose the date deliberately. He simply chose the day when he had decided, and the day happened to be what it was. This is typical of him. He is not a man who thinks in symbols. I know the account of what happened at the shop from 3 sources. My wife, who had gone to Ashwick that morning for entirely unrelated reasons and happened to be in the milliner's across the street, Mrs. Harrington, who was in the street itself, and Callum, who told me his version that evening over dinner and was, characteristically, more precise about what was said than about what anyone felt. The shop was open. It was a Tuesday, and the shop was always open on Tuesdays. Cecily Marsh kept regular hours with the reliability of someone who understands that a business runs on trust and trust runs on consistency. There were 2 women in the shop when Callum arrived. My wife's account is that they both fell quiet when the Duke of Drenmore walked through the door, and Cecily Marsh was at the counter, finishing a pinning she had been doing on a length of wool. She looked up. She did not, by any account, flinch or flush or perform any of the reactions that the situation might have seemed to call for. She simply looked at him with the direct, steady look of a woman who has had 4 months to consider how this moment, if it ever came, would go, and has decided. She sent her assistant to attend to the other women. She finished the pinning. Then she came around the counter and said, "Your Grace." Callum said, "Miss Marsh." And then, I know this because he told me, and because my wife from across the street could see his bearing if not hear his words, he said what was true, that the silk had not been damaged by her, that the real account had come to him in January, that he had accepted a version of events without hearing her, which he should not have done, and that he understood if that correction came too late to be of use. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, and this is the part I treasure, the part I have turned over in my mind many times since, because it is so exactly, precisely her, she said. It came at a useful time, Your Grace. I was planning to open the shop in the spring. Having the autumn free moved the schedule forward considerably. He looked at her. You had been planning it. For 2 years, she said. There was a silence of some length. My wife could not hear any of it from across the street, but she could see, she told me, that the two people in that shop were having a conversation of some weight, and that both of them were attending to it with the full seriousness it deserved. Then Callum said, and I believe him, because it is not the kind of thing he would invent, I should like to commission some work, if you are taking new commissions. Mrs. Peel is of the view that the east drawing room requires curtains. The original silk was never replaced. Cecily Marsh looked at him. I can only imagine what that look contained, and I have imagined it quite a bit. Then she said, I am taking commissions. Shall I call at the hall to measure the windows, or would you prefer to send the measurements to me here? I will send the measurements, he said, and the silk when it arrives. Then I will expect it, she said. He left. My wife watched him go. Mrs. Harrington, from the street, observed that the Duke of Drenmore had come out of the dress shop on the High Street on a Tuesday morning in February, which was, as she subsequently told everyone, not nothing. What happened after is the part that took longest, because Callum Ashford does not do anything quickly that matters to him, and the curtains were only the beginning of the reason he came back to Ashwick. He came back in March with the measurements. He came back in April to see the fabric choices. He came back in May on no particular errand that anyone could identify, which my wife observed with the satisfaction of a woman who has been right about something for a long time. By June, Mrs. Harrington had adjusted her account of events to include the possibility that the Duke of Drenmore had an interest in the dress shop that was not strictly confined to the east drawing room. I said nothing to Callum about any of this. I had learned in 40 years that there are moments when the most useful thing a friend can do is maintain an absolute and cheerful silence. The curtains were delivered to Drenmore Hall in July. They were, by Callum's account, conveyed to me with the particular precision he reserves for things about which he has strong feelings and chooses not to say so directly, exceptionally well made. The blue was exactly right. The fall of the fabric was exactly right. The workroom in which they hung was the better for them in every way. He said this to me at dinner in July, on the evening after delivery, and then he said, I intend to call on Miss Marsh this week to thank her for the work. That seems appropriate, I said. It is the correct thing to do. Undoubtedly. He looked at me with the expression he reserves for occasions when he knows I am not saying what I am thinking. Aldous. Callum, say what you are thinking. I put down my glass. I am thinking, I said, that you have been to Ashwick 6 times since February and that the curtains are a pretext for the 7th visit rather than the occasion of it. And I am thinking that this is the most sensible decision you have made in the matter since the beginning, and that you should go and stop talking to me about curtains. He was quiet for a long moment. She may not receive it well, he said. She received your apology with more grace than you deserved, I said, which suggests she is capable of receiving other things. He left the following morning. I have his account of what happened on that visit, because he came directly to my house afterward, which is what he does when something has gone well or very badly, and he needs to tell someone immediately and does not want to say which. He sat in my library and told me what he had said to her, which was more than he had said to her in the shop in February, more, and more honest. and the kind of thing that a man of 40 years of practiced restraint does not say easily and cannot unsay once said. He told her that the curtains were exceptional. He told her that he had been back to Ashwick 6 times in 5 months on pretexts of varying transparency. He told her that he was aware the beginning of their acquaintance was not one he could recommend, and that he did not expect the later chapters to redeem it, but that he found himself, with the honesty of a man who has decided to stop being strategic about this particular thing, unable to be in her company without preferring it to every alternative. She listened to all of this. She was, by his account, very still, not the stillness of someone who is frightened, but the stillness of someone who is paying complete attention. Then she said, "You came in October to dismiss me, and I thought you were wrong and I left. You came in February to apologize, and I thought you were right and I accepted it. And now you are asking me something else entirely. I would like to know what you are asking precisely." Callum told her precisely. 3 sentences, he said. What he was proposing, and what he was offering, and what he understood she was under no obligation to consider given the manner in which their acquaintance had begun. She was quiet for the length of time it takes, he said, for a woman who has already considered something to say what she has already decided. Then she said yes. The county adjusted to this particular piece of news with the speed that county societies always adjust to things that they have, in truth, seen coming for some time, but have been pretending not to notice. There was a period of comment, there always is, and then there was a period of acceptance, during which it became clear to even the most skeptical observers that the Duke of Drenmore had married a woman of extraordinary capability, and absolutely no interest in performing for anyone's benefit except her own, which qualities made her, in the opinion of those who knew her, exactly what that house had needed for years. The dress shop in Ashwick passed to the assistant, who had been running it competently since May in any case, and was delighted to own it. Cecily Marsh, Cecily Ashford, as she was now, came to Drenmore Hall in September and brought with her the needle case that had been her grandmother's, a set of account books she intended to apply to the estate finances, and the particular quality of unsentimental warmth that had, as I told Callum at the wedding breakfast, been visible from the moment she walked out of his study in October without a backward glance. He had the grace to admit that I was right. "You knew from the corridor," he said. "I knew from the corridor," I confirmed. "Women who are guilty argue. Women who are innocent and dignified simply leave. I have told you this." "You have told me this," he agreed. "And you dismissed it." "And I dismissed it," he paused. "I have been known to be wrong." "Rarely," I said. "But in this case, comprehensively." He looked at his wife across the room, where she was talking to my wife with the ease of 2 women who have already, in 3 weeks of acquaintance, worked out exactly what they think of each other. "Yes," he said, "comprehensively." I will tell you what I told him then, and what I still believe, that being wrong about a thing is not the measure of a man, because every man is wrong about things, and the only question is what he does when the wrongness becomes clear. Callum Ashford went to Ashwick on a Tuesday in February and said what was true, which cost him more than it would cost most men and less than he owed. And Cecily Marsh received it with the grace and the dry precision that had been evident from the October corridor, and went on from there. It was not, I will admit, the most romantic beginning to an acquaintance, but I have found, over 40 years of watching people come together and fall apart and find each other again, that the beginnings are rarely the point. The point is the Tuesday in February. The point is going to the shop on the high street and saying what is true in front of whoever happens to be watching, because it is the right thing and she is worth it and you have known it, if you are honest with yourself, since the October corridor. He knew it from the corridor. He simply took a while to get to February. That, I suppose, is love, or at least the particular variety of it that looks like stubbornness until it doesn't.